Okay, good morning, YouTube family. Going to try that again. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty there, but I am back. Sorry about that. Good morning, good morning. Happy Sunday. Happy November the 1st. Are we already at November? Yes, we are. But hey, I'm glad that we've made it this far, and I'm glad that you're with me this morning. As you can see, I'm a little bit excited. Some of it's nervousness, some of it's anticipation, but we are finally here. We are at the crossroads, especially when it comes to the upcoming election. So we've got what? 2 days. We've got, all of today, which today is Souls to the Polls Day. So that means that folks are getting out. And in a lot of the African American church community, Souls to the Polls is a big thing because churches will have their regular service, and then they will organize get out the vote efforts for after the service. And a lot of their congregation members will leave the service and actually go together to the polls. Now, of course, that's a little bit different this year because most churches are still meeting virtually. So they're having Zoom church, but that doesn't stop us from asking people to go out and vote as soon as the church service is over. So I am a big proponent of Souls for the Polls. And even though I'm not preaching to a choir or preaching to a congregation this morning, you guys are going to be my congregation. And I say, after I get finished, if you haven't voted yet, please go. Please make sure that you get those votes in. The turnout for early voting has been unprecedented, and it is so exciting. I think the last number I saw was over 90 million Americans have voted so far. Is that not crazy? Oh, 90 million voters have early voted. I think our normal totals in even large turnout elections are like 150 or 160 million. So even if you take the 160 as a norm, over half of that number has already voted. And a lot of those folks I've been seeing are folks between the ages of 18 and 29, are younger people. And I call them young because you're young to me. 18 to 29, that's still very young. I've got shoes older than you. So I am so grateful to see the energy with the young people and see them getting out there and having their voices heard. Because one thing I do know about this is young people are going to hold these leaders accountable, right? So if they made the effort, like it appears that they have, to get out and vote this time, you better believe they are going to be holding these leaders accountable because they have power. They're the future. They are the future of the electorate. They are the future voters. And so they have a say so, and they're able now, will be able to wield their power and say, look, if you don't do what we've voted you in to do, if you don't hold to the ideals and the principles and the expectations and the policy proposals that we want, we will vote you out. And we have the numbers to do that. We have the energy and we have the influence. So all of this participation is really good and positive for our democracy, right? So I'm very excited about that. Good morning, Kimberly. Good to see you, dear. And so today, just as a last push, I wanted to just emphasize that we are on the cusp of some transformational change, right? I mean, I had just posted something earlier too, that I feel like that in some ways, all of this intimidation that's happening, all of this misinformation, all of these attempts at voter suppression and trying to get votes thrown out. I saw in Texas, they're trying to get over 100,000 votes thrown out of people who voted curbside because they weren't able to stand in line. And so the Texas Supreme Court made it available for folks in those positions, vulnerable people, to vote curbside. And over 100,000 took advantage of that. And there's a group of politicians in Texas trying to get those votes thrown out. Like, who does that? Like, who actively fights to keep human beings, American citizens who rightfully voted, from having their votes counted? I don't even want to know what part of my soul that I have to be disconnected from to think that that's okay. But I really feel like all of these things are playing into a larger narrative that there's been a version of America that is in its death throes right now. This notion of an America that is exclusive, that is simply set up for particular groups, particular races, particular genders, particular income classes to succeed, and the rest of us have to survive on scraps. See, I don't believe that that's the America that we want any longer. I think that these folks who are in power and who feel like they have been empowered are desperately trying to hold on to it. That's right, Kimberly. It's a class thing. And it is, first and foremost, it was an illusion from the beginning. The things that they thought and they espoused were what America stood for were not fully true anyway. They were crafted by men who had their own agendas, by folks who had their own political motivations. And again, it was power grabs in my estimation, and just looking from historical perspective. So I know this is not so terribly spiritual today, but there is one message that I do want to slide in here because it is related to the election. And it's a topic that I've kind of shied away from. I haven't spoken much about it publicly just because, number one, it's very sensitive to me. It's very personal in watching how some of these things have unfolded, particularly when it comes to people of faith. So, let me say this, as a woman of faith and as a woman of deep faith, faith in God, faith in people, just faith in general, it has been very, very hurtful for me to see religion, faith weaponized, politicized, and cause such a rift even within the church that we are warring with each other over what the definition of faith and religion really is. And so that is one aspect of this old America, this other version of America that I also feel like will hopefully demise with all of the other things that are going through this process of recognizing that their end is at hand. Because I don't feel that we as a nation can afford to be so divided that we can't even agree upon taking care of our fellow human beings, right? Like, in its essence and at its core, faith is about loving our neighbor. Faith is about, taking care of the least of these and the poor and the widow, the oppressed. For me, faith itself transcends political ideology. It transcends party. I don't think that God or Jesus, and let me say this, I'm speaking about the Christian faith right now because that seems, unfortunately, be the faith that dominates these conversations, when in fact we are a nation that is free of religion and people have the right and the freedom to practice whatever faith they choose to follow and no faith at all. So there's a little part of me that though I consider myself a progressive Christian, it bothers me when I see other folks who profess to believe in Christianity somehow practicing this notion that ours is the only religion that's acceptable and that the country then must define itself and its ideals by our interpretation of Christianity. That's not biblical. That's not constitutional. And so I am one who is not a proponent of suggesting somehow that there's any one faith that gets to set the tone for how we govern. Is there a separation of church and state? Yes, I believe that there ought to be, in a sense that I don't think any one particular religion or religion in general should influence a government. But I think when I think about faith and religion from a more personal perspective, I don't necessarily want someone from another religion other than my own. It doesn't matter to me necessarily if you are in a position of authority in politics and in government. it doesn't matter to me necessarily what you believe or what your faith is, right? Because for me, I don't, when I look to my government leaders, when I look to the president and those offices in Congress, I want to know where you stand on student debt, loans. I want to know what you're going to do about health care. So if your faith informs you on those issues as a leader, that's all well and fine, but I don't need you to espouse anything in particular faith related for you to get support from me. I don't need a pastor in the presidency. I need a president. I've got a pastor. I've got spiritual leader. I am a pastor. I am a minister. So I have a resource to go for my faith and to support those things which align with me from a faith perspective. But in leadership and in government, if the president, him or her, happens to share my faith, great, wonderful. But even then, I don't want them solely using their faith as a springboard for how they will govern. Let it inform, but do not let it influence to a point where you're leaving out a majority of other Americans who may not even share that particular faith or faith at all. Now, I know this may not be popular, and I know that there's not necessarily a lot of people who will agree, and that's okay too. I'm fine with that. I'm very rooted and grounded in who I am and where I stand and what my beliefs are. And I just think that God, that religion, that faith, or no religion at all ought to transcend our political structures. I think that if you are voting based on your faith or based on what you believe, that's certainly up to you. But I think that's more of a personal choice and should not be one that is expected from people who don't believe like you, people who don't look like you, people who don't worship like you, or people who don't think like you. Because now what you're doing is you are sort of usurping their own agency and their own ability to operate from what they're rooted in and what they believe in. And that's not what we're here to do. We're here to bear one another up. We're here to support each other for who we are and what we believe. And we do not require that other people have to think and see things the way that I do in order for how they see it to be valid. Does that make sense? So for me, as I've been looking at some of the conversations coming across social media here in the last days, I saw a gentleman yesterday. He posted something and said, just a reminder, no faithful Christian will vote for Joe Biden if you're a faithful Christian. I'm like, what? Excuse me? And he put that out there because there is this conversation around what does it mean to be a faithful Christian? And we could spend a whole lot of time talking about that, because and you're going to get various different interpretations on what that means. But the notion that someone would feel like they and they only have the the position and the understanding and the definition of what it means to be a faithful Christian, and therefore by their definition a vote for Joe Biden suggests that you're not faithful. Whew. So what that really does is that speaks more to that person and their understanding of faith and of theology than it does to the people that they're actually trying to shame, quite literally, in posting something like that. And he got ratioed, rightfully so, where people were, coming back and saying, really, is this what you're going with? But on the flip side of that, I've seen, Christians on the left, some of my folks say, well, here's the reasons why Christians shouldn't vote for Trump. Okay, so you've got one faction that's saying, here's why Christians shouldn't vote for Biden. And then you've got others who are saying, here's why Christians shouldn't vote for Trump. But in both of those cases, people are ultimately coming out of their own experience and out of their own understanding about what faith is, right? And so we have to keep that in mind, folks. Just keep that in mind, that at the end of the day, your personal faith or no faith at all is what should inform you when you are looking toward leadership. And it should inform you in a sense that I know what I believe. And if my leaders believe like I do, that that may be a bonus for me, but I don't need my leaders necessarily to believe exactly as I do, because what I believe and what I'm rooted in is not dependent upon who the leaders are in our government. That's what we have to keep separate. That my service to God, my service to mankind, my view of how the world is, and my hope toward how the world should be, is not predicated at all on who is in office at any particular moment. We don't look at the things that are seen. Faith doesn't look at what's seen. Faith, because those things are temporary, subject to change, but faith is eternal. What we believe in, who we believe in, the things that we stand for, the things that shape us, those things are going to outlast and have outlasted every single person who's been in a higher office, and they will continue to do that. My only hope is that if the person who is elected to governmental leadership in our country is a person of faith, my only prayer is that that person, again, allows their faith to inform them, and my hope is that their faith informs them in a way that is inclusive of all Americans, of all people, of all walks of life and all walks of faith, and that it isn't narrowed down to a specific few who only believe the way that you believe. I don't see God in that light. I see God in a much more expansive light, much more welcoming, much more affirming, much more open, to all of us. We are all a part of God's creation, and I just feel like in these, final and last days, in particular, to focus on what unites us, and not what divides us, because we really do have more in common than we think. And just because we may believe and see God differently, or maybe we find God in nature, or maybe we don't necessarily feel like we need to have a relationship with God to make what decisions we feel like are best for ourselves. All of those have to be on the table, and all of those have to be validated as okay. So let's hang in there, folks. We are almost across the finish line, and we're going to get across it together. Try to be as calm and as focused as you can be over the next couple of days. As I mentioned last week, and I'll mention again, I'm very excited to join Humanity Forward on Tuesday, election night, for a humanity hang that we've titled Finding Calm in the Chaos. So myself, along with Stacey Rutland of the Income Movement, will be co-facilitating a hang to help folks just navigate the results as they come in, to prepare themselves mentally, spiritually, physically, and whatever we need to do to help us get through this upcoming night. It's going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be tumultuous in nature. There's going to be a lot going on. And so if you need a safe place or a spot to just come hang out and get yourself together, that's what we offer to you. We're going to start at 6:00. Please visit Move Humanity Forward to get the login information. And yeah, join us, because we're going to be kind of doing it real time like everybody else, and just want to make sure that we have avenues and forums for people to feel supported, for people to know that they're not alone, and that whatever they're experiencing, that they can experience it in a safe and loving space, so that we can all prayerfully move to the next phase on November 4th of putting our country back on the track to become the beloved community that it was designed to be. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you. Kimberly just put the link to the Humanity Hang in the chat. Thank you for that. Kimberly. I've also pinned it to my post on Twitter, and I'll be putting it on Facebook and promoting it. So please join us. Thank you all. Have a fantastic rest of the weekend, and I'll see you hopefully on Tuesday night and then again next Sunday. All right? Take care, everybody.